song, you might then hear the melody, singing along with the words. Or perhaps notice little flourishes from the different instruments that add colour to the piece. Or you might tap out the rhythm. Music can be broken down into these different parts or elements, the ingredients with which composers work. Some pieces of music focus on one particular element: rhythm, melody, or timbre. When elements are combined, highlighting them one by one can help us to hear the whole piece differently. So what's the mix of ingredients in When I'm 64? In all music, time is structured in some way. Rhythm is the foundation of music, the heartbeat. When I'm 64 has a regular pattern which underpins the whole song. A clear beat played by the bass guitar. The other rhythm instrument here is the drum kit. The drummer emphasises the same beat as the bass guitar, but also adds interesting rhythmic detail. This is the main pattern played by the drums, but it isn't always the same throughout the song. There are places where the drummer has different patterns, or where he uses different parts of the kit, such as the hi-hat. If we put these different patterns together, in verse 1 of the song, the drummer plays this. Rhythm was the focus of much of American composer Steve Reich's work in the early 1970s.
My music in the 1960s and 1970s was American music. You could even say more specifically music mostly from New York City. Extremely rhythmic, somewhat abrasive. Pieces with more attention given to rhythm than to changes of harmony or to changes of orchestration. Clapping music was composed in 1972, but the reason that I did the piece was really traceable to a visit to a flamenco club in Brussels. Now, as you know, Brussels is not famous for flamenco. What we were doing in Brussels was giving a concert. My ensemble was giving a concert. And in those days, this was in the early 70s, we were not very well known, and we had a vast amount of equipment. We carried our own marimbas, our own glockenspiels, our own drums, our own electric organs, our own amplifiers, our own microphones, and these were in big black packing cases which had to be put inside of 2 small trucks and driven around Europe by myself and one of the other musicians. So after this concert in Brussels, which used all this equipment, the sponsor took us out to this nightclub, and there were these 2 musicians playing guitar and singing, and they weren't very good, as you might imagine in Brussels. But they started to clap, as flamenco musicians do, and their clapping was absolutely chillingly good. And so after a few drinks, myself and the other members of the group, some of whom were percussionists, began sort of fooling around with clapping patterns, and the idea sort of occurred to me, what if the truck didn't make it? What if the lights went out? What if the fuse blew? Here's a piece that you can do anytime, any place, without 2,000 pounds of equipment. All you need is 2 human beings. Clapping music is constructed out of basically one repeating pattern, which is I play that throughout the whole piece, and Thad starts in unison with me playing the exact same pattern, and then he shifts it one beat ahead. So for instance, at bar 2, he ends up playing. So if you put that together, what we'll do, just to show you how that works, is we'll play bar 1 in unison, 4 repeats, and then we'll switch to the second bar. Thad will make a little nod at the downbeat of the second bar so you can see and hear the change, and we'll do 4 repeats of that. Piece continues with Thad moving ahead, a bar ahead of me each time, and each time he changes, as you hear in the full complete piece, the pattern, the overall pattern between us changes. When he gets almost back together with me, we'll play it again just at 1 bar before he comes back into unison. So we took the beginning and 1 ahead, now we've gone all the way around and we're just before the ending. We'll do 4 repeats of that, he'll nod, and then we'll go back into unison.
Melody, like rhythm, is an important part of the song. It's also the driving force behind a lot of folk music, and not just songs. Memorable tunes mean traditional music survives.
Most traditional musicians have a big bank of tunes which they can draw on. They're not catalogued or anything like that in your head, but they pop out when needed. I learned most of my music from my grandparents initially and from other relatives and friends playing around. I just received the tunes from them as if it were learning to speak or learning a language. The tunes just went in and I have them there to draw on them when I feel like it. That was the first part of a traditional Irish polka. It's very simple in form in that the melody is restricted to a very small range of notes. And you may have noticed that the melody moves very much in step. There are no major leaps or jumps within the tune. This is a scheme used very much in Irish music where the melody is very simple to lure the listener to listen to the tune. The pub, as a cultural venue, let's say, is relatively new. When I say relatively new, perhaps 100 years. And what was there were regarded as visiting houses, or where the people actually had parties or gatherings in their houses, and the musicians would gather in those houses and perform there. This has progressed to the pub, and generally the music today is played in sessions and very often in the pub setup. In a session, that polka would be taken as a unit, but then you could progress to another tune and maybe another tune, and it could even go to another tune. So it becomes a kind of a circle of tunes. expect people from any walk of life to arrive into the session, really, from doctors to fishermen to farmers, could be anybody. Generally, there'd be the makeup of fiddles, flutes, perhaps tin whistles, accordions, which we call the box, and then going into the accompaniment instruments, which would be guitar or bouzouki, and perhaps a percussion instrument, the bodhrán.
In an Irish music session, the actual sound of the music is flexible, depending on who turns up to play. Each instrument produces its own tone colour, or timbre. In When I'm 64, we've heard the fundamental rhythm instruments, the bass guitar and the drums. And we've seen how the voice of Paul McCartney is matched by the clarinet in the third verse. The clarinet is also there to provide a particular timbre. In fact, there's a trio of clarinets, 2 clarinets and a bass clarinet. It's their special tone colours that contribute to the almost cabaret effect of the song. The clarinet part is constructed on 3 levels. The first clarinet on the top line, with the most interesting part. The bass clarinet is a kind of highlight instrument at specific points. And the second clarinet fills the gap between the two. The clarinets also play in the chorus, little flourishes which lead the way back to the verse. For Japanese composer Toru Takemitsu, timbre has always been important, with the colours of different instruments exploited for their own sake, a technique inherited from certain composers working earlier in the 20th century.
僕の音楽の生活が始まったのが戦争直後ですから。僕の最初の頃は、まあ今でもそうだけれども、ドビュッシー、アバンベルグ、ウェーベルン、メッシアンの音楽には非常に影響を受けて、まあ、それどうしてかっていうと、多分それは色彩、音楽の色彩、カラーっていうものだと思うんですね。っていうのは、まあ僕は日本人で音楽を聴くときにいつもその音の音色っていうか、その音の色っていうものに非常に強い関心があって、そういうヨーロッパの新しい作曲家と同じような仕事をしたいというふうにまあ思ったわけで、何も抵抗はなかった。
Timbre is foregrounded in his music more than rhythm or melody. He even colours his manuscripts as part of the composing process. Another important stimulus for him is nature, the seasons, landscapes, and above all, water.
日本人にとって水っていうのは非常に大事で、世界中誰でもそうですけど、僕自身はその水っていうものは非常に強く惹かれるっていうか感動したのは、僕の家のそばにそのアーティフィシャルレイクがあって、それが一回人造湖が水がなくなって干してなんか発掘してたことがあるんですね。その時にその人造湖の中に一本川が走ってて、普段水がいっぱい張ってある時はその川が見えなかったわけだけど、その水がなくなった時にその水の中にまたもう一つ川が流れているってことにそれがなんて言うんでしょうね、僕は音楽を書く時非常になんか強い霊感を与えてくれるわけです。
Takemitsu's love of water led him to compose a whole series of waterscapes. One of these, Rain Tree, depicts a very special tree whose thousands of finger-like leaves store moisture, sprinkling the previous night's drops of rain onto the ground in the following afternoon.
タイトルを思いついたらほとんど僕の場合は3分の2は作曲が終わってるっていうか、タイトルはなんか非常に聴く人を限定しては束縛してはいけないし、だけれどもその人に何か喚起するものをサジェストして方向をづける。
Here the title Rain Tree stimulated the composer to use the tone colours of percussion instruments, marimbas and vibraphone, to represent the sound of water droplets, scattered raindrop, or rain droplet from the leaves. He enhances the colour of the piece even further by giving lighting instructions for performance. Each instrument can be highlighted by a spotlight, turned on or off at particular moments in the piece. Takemitsu uses percussion for a specific sound effect. Similarly, percussion is used in When I'm 64 in the chorus. With a slight change in the second chorus. There's also a piano playing, providing a more subtle timbre to the piece. You hear it fleetingly in verse 1, and in verse 3, and more clearly in the chorus. At the end of the second chorus, both piano and bells add colour, but the bells also pick out some of the melody. If we add the kit, or rhythm, we begin to hear some of the ingredients working together in this song. Knowing some of what's gone into the song helps us hear the whole thing differently. The spotlight is no longer on any single element, but rather how they interact to create the unique sound